I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Hope you are doing really well. My goodness, I cannot believe it is already October. It's unbelievable. It doesn't feel like October, however, because here on the south coast of the UK, it is unbelievably warm still. Yesterday, I went down to the beach and it was as if it was a midsummer's day. The sea was full of people swimming, loads of paddleboards out. I mean, it was lovely, if a little strange and a little bit worrying when we think about global warming. But hey ho, sorry, I've started the podcast in a very British way, talking about the weather. Let's talk about this week's episode. This week, I have Dr. Tanya McEachern on the podcast. Now, Dr. Tanya is a renowned naturopathic doctor from Ontario in Canada. And Tanya has a dedicated passion for holistic health, particularly women's health. And she draws from years of experience and expertise to bring a unique perspective on natural and integrative approaches to menopause. Her work has helped illuminate the path for hundreds of women seeking balance and well-being during this stage. I think you're going to really enjoy Dr. Tanya's perspective on menopause, and she's got lots of pearls of wisdom to share with you. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Tanya McEachern. I'm delighted today because I have Dr. Tanya McEachern here on the podcast. Hello, really lovely to have you here today.
Hi, Polly. Thank you so much for having me.
I think a really good place to start, Tanya, would be to find out a little bit more about you. So tell me, what do you do? Whereabouts are you in the world?
Awesome. So I am in Ontario, Canada, just outside of Toronto, in sort of like a smaller, but still very large city. And I'm a naturopathic doctor with a huge focus and passion for women's health, particularly in the menopausal period is what I tend to attract.
So tell me, Tanya, what is the difference between a naturopathic doctor and naturopathic medicine compared to the more conventional medicine?
Yeah. Naturopathic doctors are trained very similarly to sort of like your Western medical doctor that everybody, sort of thinks about as their GP, right? Like, so it's your family doctor, or maybe you have a nurse practitioner, that kind of a thing. We're trained very similarly. So we both have like undergrads in bachelor's of science, and then we go to medical college. Mine's a little bit shorter. My medical college is only 4 years, whereas for medical doctors, usually more like 5 or 6 at least. So we get the same anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. We both learn a lot about pharmaceuticals, but then sort of what we use to help people and treat people is a bit different. So they typically, what is within their scope is drugs and surgery. So if you go see them, that's the type of treatment that you're going to be offered, if it's appropriate, of course. What I offer is more holistic methods of treating the body. So I might use herbs, I might use acupuncture, I might use vitamin injections, I might use dietary and lifestyle changes, and I might teach you mindfulness to sort of treat things from the mind down, right? Instead of aggressively going after the physical symptoms. So that's a little bit about how we differ. It's really in the treatment methods that we use to help people.
So it sounds like naturopathic medicine is more kind of trying to get to the root cause as opposed to just treating the symptoms. Yeah.
You got it. Exactly. Yeah.
And how did you come to kind of have a real focus and interest in menopause and perimenopause?
So it kind of found me. I prescribe bioidentical hormones, hormone therapy. And that is something that even if people don't really understand what a naturopath does, and many people do not, if you go, what is a naturopathic doctor? They don't know, and that's totally fine. But there are a few things that people do tend to understand about naturopathic doctors. And the bioidentical hormone piece is something that even if somebody has never heard of a naturopathic doctor before, they might read, oh, bioidentical hormones, very well known to help with menopause symptoms, hot flashes, moods, period regulation. So they tend to seek out that type of care. So because I prescribe those, I tend to attract a lot of those women.
So we were having a little chat before about bioidentical hormones, and it's a really interesting topic because you're coming from Canada, from North America, and it is a little bit different to how we talk about hormones here in the UK. So I think this is a really good conversation to have, because I know that we have a lot of American listeners, Canadian listeners, as well as listeners here in the UK. And I think for those of us in the UK, we on our NHS system are prescribed what is called body identical hormones, although bioidentical hormones are available. Now, let me just clear this up for the people who are listening, because the body identical hormones we're prescribed on the NHS are actually what you would call, Tanya, bioidentical hormones, because they are made from hormones which are very similar to the ones which were made. They're not synthetic. Bioidentical hormones in here in the UK are also non-synthetic, but they are prescribed more by private doctors, and they aren't regulated here in the UK in the same way that the body identical ones are. So there is that sort of slight grey area. But what you do, Tanya, maybe you could just tell us how you work in Canada, because it's the same as North America as well.
Yeah, there are these differences amongst different countries, even within different provinces in Canada. There might be differences. My area of expertise is, of course, where I am regulated, which is in Ontario. So naturopathic doctors in Ontario are regulated, sort of by the government, essentially. Like, we have a regulatory body where basically, if we do something we're not supposed to do, then there's somebody who, a group, we call it colleges in Ontario. Your college is that person who will discipline you, could take your registration away. You would no longer be allowed to call yourself a naturopathic doctor, that kind of a thing. And so we are regulated in Ontario, but there are other regions of the world where naturopathic doctors are not regulated at all. And then you've got the actual hormones. Are those regulated or not? Which means, is there a watchdog that's there ensuring safety? I think regulation is a good thing. As a registered health professional who's regulated, I think it's a good thing. It provides the profession or the treatment with legitimacy, and people can feel more comfortable using these things, knowing that they are regulated. So I'm regulated, and the treatments, the bioidentical hormones here in Ontario, are regulated as well. So you have to be part of a registered profession to be able to prescribe those at all. And then I send my prescriptions off to a pharmacist who is, of course, regulated, and then they create whatever it is that I want that woman to have.
Yes, that's good. I think it's really good just to kind of get that distinction, because, so we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the same, the same things. Let's go back. So say a woman comes in to see you and she is presenting with a whole range of perimenopause symptoms. What is the process that you go through in order to help her?
Often I will start with healing her gut. To be honest, sometimes I don't even go down the hormone route immediately, because gut health is so linked to hormone health that I tend to I do some gut work first. I will usually bring inflammation down, because inflammation is the enemy of any health condition that you want to name, inflammation will make it worse. So I take an anti-inflammatory approach to start. Do that for, a couple of months, because it can take time for this gut to come around, right? Some dietary changes. We look at movement, and I do give some supplements typically at the beginning. I'll also look at what blood work they've had. I might send them for blood work as well. This is a lot of thing that people don't know about naturopathic doctors, is that we send for blood work. So I give you a requisition, you go to the lab just like you would with your medical doctor, and you give your blood, and then we get to see, what's going on. Does this person need vitamin D? Vitamin D will impact hormonal signaling, hormonal receptors. If you've got a deficiency there, or even if you're suboptimal, that could be contributing to a lot of your hormonal symptoms. What are the B12 levels, right? Because there's a lot of overlapping symptoms between nutrient deficiencies and menopausal symptoms.
Yeah.
So I do that first.
Okay. And so when you're looking at the gut, so you've mentioned you recommend some perhaps some dietary changes and some movement. What sort of things do you regularly come up? What's the sort of commonalities in things you recommend to your patients?
Yeah, I'll give you three good examples. So number one is, with most people, I will usually test food sensitivities. So this is what foods give you inflammation. So it's blood work. Again, you go to the lab and you give your blood, and we can see what foods are causing inflammation. So this is really useful for people who are like, I'm doing everything right. I eat a whole foods, diet. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. Well, you can be sensitive to foods that are perfectly healthy foods, but they give you inflammation. So for a time, we don't eat the foods that give us inflammation. The inflammation can dissolve and go away. You can eat those foods again in the future without having the same inflammation. So I do that a lot, because then it's like, here you go. This is what we should be eating for the next approximately 3 months. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is, most women I find don't eat enough protein. And this is huge for blood sugar regulation. If we have too many refined carbohydrates, not enough protein. By refined carbohydrates, I mean, grain products, breads, pastas, cereals, all that stuff. You can really dysregulate your blood sugar, and that will give you worse symptoms. Think about symptoms of blood sugar dysregulation, right? It's like mood swings, headaches, fatigue, you might have GI upset. So there's so many, weight, right? Like all of those things are going to be made worse by blood sugar ups and downs. I'm not even talking about, when you get into insulin resistance and diabetes, just talking about keeping it steady all day. So protein is important for that. It's important for hormonal health. It's important for weight maintenance. It's important for anti-aging. Like, you'll get less skin sagging if you eat protein, So that's number two, protein. And then number three, I tend to recommend magnesium a lot. That's another one that I find most women are totally deficient in. And for that one, some nutrients I'll test first, like vitamin D. So then I can know, do you need it? What dosage do we need? Very specific recommendations can follow. With magnesium, I tend to give it. And I give it in a form that doesn't cause things like loose stool. I give it at an appropriate dosage. I give it at a certain time of day. And then we see, like, is this helping? This can help with sleep. This can help with mood. This is healthy for weight maintenance. All of these things that menopausal women can tend to struggle with. So, and I feel comfortable giving that usually because the soils that our fruits and vegetables grow in is, it has become very magnesium deficient over the years. Mm-hmm. So even if people are eating what was historically magnesium rich foods, they're not really getting that same magnesium content anymore. People tend to worry about calcium, and especially if you're avoiding dairy or something like that. But most foods are fortified with calcium, at least where I am in Ontario, Canada. So even if you're dairy free, let's say you drink rice milk or oat milk, it will be fortified. Calcium is added in, whereas magnesium, there is very little magnesium fortification.
So is there a type of magnesium which you prefer? Because you go and look, say, online at all the different magnesiums. There are so many different types. How do we know which is the right magnesium to take for us?
Yeah. This is something where you ideally want to work with somebody, right, who can help you and who can make specific recommendations. So you're ensuring safety and you're ensuring that you actually need it. So that being said, in general, I would dose magnesium at bedtime because it tends to help with sleep. And I would say, 95% of perimenopausal women are struggling in that department. So I do it at bedtime, and I'll tend to ask about bowel function before I choose the form. Sometimes I give a blend, like a liquid blend of multiple different magnesiums. So by this, I mean, is it citrate? Is it bisglycinate? Is it malate? Is it oxalate? All those words that follow when you look at a magnesium label. And so if I find that, let's say stools are hard, like this person is more prone towards constipation, not having good daily bowel movements, then I might put something in there with some citrate, because citrate tends to get the bowels moving better. If somebody has loose stool, we don't want to give them citrate because we're probably going to aggravate that loose stool further. So then I might give them bisglycinate alone to make sure that we're not pushing them in the wrong direction.
And so when you recommend those recommendations, which I think are just so, they're such key recommendations, for all women. So then somebody actually wants to go down the hormone route. So how do you approach that? Because I know it's quite different, again, to probably what women are used to here in the UK.
Yeah. So if we want to go down the hormone route, I test hormones first. Like, as a rule, I do not prescribe hormones before I've done baseline testing for that woman because things are in flux. So let's say I want to, the woman is seeking treatment for her hot flashes. That's her primary reason for wanting hormone therapy. I say, great, let's test your hormones. You could take a woman who's, let's say they're all 47 years old, okay, two women, and you test one of their hormones. That woman might be low on estrogens and progesterone. Another woman, exact same symptoms, same age, you test her, she might be high on estrogen and maybe deficient on progesterone, or progesterone could even be normal. So you can see how in those two completely different situations, which we would have never known unless we looked and tested, the treatments, the creams that I make for these women are going to be completely different. I'm not going to give a woman who has high estrogen cream. This is going to make her worse.
What about the fact that our hormones are really fluctuating, particularly during perimenopause? How do you do many tests? How do you kind of compensate for that? A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Once I test them to start, I do monitor. So I would say that as hormones change during menopause, of course they're in flux, but there are trends. So if you're already like pretty low on progesterone, for example, it's not likely to increase unless 1 month you ovulate, right? But if it's a woman who, hasn't had a period in over a year, right? That's now the definition of your post,
Yeah.
it's no cycles for a year. That progesterone is very unlikely to all of a sudden become really high. And bioidenticals, even in that situation, bioidenticals are somewhat gentle. Like they're fairly gentle on the body. The body tends to take what it needs from it. So it's not quite as damaging if you continue on the creams, even if you have a surge of that hormone. So when I test originally, and then I test periodically as well to ensure that we're still good.
Yeah, because here, if you're on the National Health Service, there's just sort of a understanding from your doctor that if you're over 45, then your hormones are declining, although your estrogen quite possibly is fluctuating. So you kind of, it's a bit of like, well, let's see how you go. You get your progesterone, and then you might get your cream or your gel or your spray of estrogen, and it's like start small and then just see how you feel. So it's very much a kind of like, let's just keep our fingers crossed and see. So this obviously is a much more specific, more individual approach to the whole thing.
Yeah, and I don't sort of criticize the part where we see how you feel. Like try this and see how you feel, because I always want to marry those two things together. Like the woman in front of you telling you how she feels is equally as important as the information that we gather objectively when we measure and test her hormone levels. Like, so we use those two things together to treat the woman. But personally, I would never prescribe hormone treatments without assessing hormonal baseline.
How do you assess the hormones? Is it through a Dutch test?
I do that
Yeah,
often. Yes, I
yeah.
give. So because this is another sort of back to that piece at the beginning, like what do naturopath doctors do? In Ontario, we are completely private. So what that means is that the public insurance in Ontario, it's called OHIP, they don't pay for my services or any of my testing at all. So people are paying for my services either out of their pockets, or most people are lucky enough that they have private insurance plans. So that's how most of my stuff gets paid for. So the Dutch test for like, it can be quite expensive. Like for some people, it's in the neighborhood of $500. It's a really good evaluation. Like I run it all the time. A lot of women are really ready to put resources towards their health, especially once they get to the menopausal years. And so they're okay with spending that. There are a few people who, if you're really limited with the financial resources, I'll do a much smaller panel, a smaller report in which I use saliva. So it's always urine or saliva that I start with for baseline hormonal evaluations. This is a totally other topic about why serum is sort of not the best. By serum, I mean blood. Why that's not necessarily the best way to evaluate a woman's baseline reproductive hormones. So I will offer like smaller tests. It's what the woman wants. Like I give her options. I say, you can pay this amount of money for this test. This is what you'll get. It's enough for me to treat you. It's fine. We can use it. Your decision, or you can do a bigger, more comprehensive evaluation like the Dutch test, which is like a 20-page report, goes into stuff that's stress hormones in detail as well. Like it's just a more comprehensive evaluation. I give women the choice.
And let's just talk about then the difference in hormones. So as we've been talking about bioidentical, body identical hormones, these are very different to synthetic hormones. So can you just tell us the difference? Because there is quite a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would actually applaud the UK. What I do know about your guys's way of doing sort of some of your hormonal stuff there is that nobody gets synthetic
No.
anymore. And I think that that's amazing because in the US and in Canada, a lot of women are still being prescribed the synthetic stuff and the synthetic stuff. So essentially what they're doing is it's not identical to what your body used to produce naturally. So it tends to be constructed from, like, the estrogens come from horse urine, and the bioidentical stuff comes from yams, so plant-based. And then the manufacturing is a little bit different as well. But synthetic tends to be more risky. Like if you think about, something like horse urine, that turns on, like there's about 1,400 genes that get turned on from horse equine estrogen, whereas your body's natural estradiol turns on about 500. So you can see how you're getting genes maybe turned on for cancer, maybe turned on for weight gain, right? Like we are not horses, nor do we want to be horses. So why do we use horse estrogen? I'd rather be a yam.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd rather be a yam as well.
I'd rather be a sweet potato. And so that's one of the main differences as well, is those treatments tend to be a little bit riskier when you talk about some of the downsides of HRT.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, that the US and Canada haven't yet switched over to the body identical type, because it's not massively expensive here in the UK. It's very inexpensive to use, but obviously the risks are so much less for things like blood clots, for cancer as well. So yeah, so I think that's really important for women, particularly in North America, to really understand and ask questions about what is their HRT made of, because you want to try and go for this body or bioidentical HRT. It's it's just much more natural. I'd love to know your take on HRT, because I know it can be or hormones, because it can be quite a controversial subject, because I hear a lot of time women going, I just don't like the idea of putting foreign things in my body. Yet, having said that, you might ask them and they've been on the contraceptive pill for years and years and years and didn't really think twice about that. And this contraceptive pill is actually made out of these synthetic hormones, not these body identical hormones. So yeah, I'm just interested to see how, do you hear that a lot? Do you get a lot of resistance when you recommend these hormones?
Yeah, it's certainly not the only tool in my tool belt to treat hormones, like, because I can use herbs. And so I can do complexes that have herbs like black cohosh, wild yam. I can use herbal medicine to help control, like, not control, but to treat menopausal symptoms, right? So if a woman comes to me and they're like, I'm really uncomfortable doing hormones, I say that's fine. Like we don't have to go that route. To me, it makes no difference as long as you're feeling better. It doesn't matter to me whether, it's not like I get a kickback from prescribing a pharmaceutical versus prescribing like an herbal. Makes no difference to me at all. But sometimes I will ask, well, why? Like, just to have that conversation. Like, maybe that woman has a misunderstanding about HRT and, is only thinking about the blood clots and the cancer. Like, she's only thinking about that stuff. So when I explain a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about today, like these are bioidenticals, we test first, then we monitor. And a lot of women will tend to, maybe they might even learn something new and then desire actually to use the HRT, because the HRT has just a couple of advantages over other treatment modalities like herbs. Like, it's a little bit more, you can never say that something is guaranteed to work. Like, you're you're not supposed to say that as a doctor either. Like that's a big no-no. You cannot make promises about treatment outcomes for people. So, but I would say that, if you use the creams, there tends to be a bit more efficacy, a bit more comfort in knowing that this is, I don't want to say definitely going to work, but you know what I mean. Like it's more likely to work better because it's more controlled with the quantities of everything. We know exactly what we're putting into it. Whereas herbs, people respond differently to different herbs. So there might also be more trial and error if you go the herbal route, right? Another advantage of the creams is that, at least in Ontario, most people have drug coverage with those private plans that I was talking about. So they don't have to pay out of pocket as much for that treatment versus if they take herbs and we're just using supplements, then typically people are paying out of pocket for that stuff. So, but again, it's the woman's choice. And I just explained those things and say, you tell me, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what's so important. It's about, empowering the person in front of you to make those decisions for themselves. And as long as they've got all that information available to them, then yeah, it's their choice. Everybody has a choice of how they want to proceed and go forward. And I think that's what's so important. I think so many of us think that we don't have a choice, that there is only one option, but there aren't. This is why I do this podcast, because it was to try and open our eyes to all the different solutions in inverted commas, but options available to us to help us through this stage.
Yes, exactly.
So we were talking as well, actually, just before I press record. I always do this. It's like we have a chat and then I kind of keep bringing things up. You were saying, I really just love this whole, positive take on perimenopause and on this stage of life, because there is still lots of negativity about it. And so, yeah, I'd just love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, the positive angle is where it's at. Like, this should be looked at as an opportunity for growth, evolution, personal development, like taking that angle, a learning, you're a student, like you're learning about your body, maybe for the first time in your entire life. This is an opportunity that women have to go, I don't really like the way that I'm feeling. There's some things going on in my body. Maybe there's something that I could do about this. Instead of suffering and, complaining and it's okay to vent, of course, as well, but to really have the mindset of let's take charge, like let's do something about this. Let me set myself up for good health now for the next 10 years. Let me work towards that ideal higher self as much as I can.
Yeah, I think it's just such an empowering point of view, because I know for one that was my case. I felt like up until a certain point, I'd just been kind of going through the motions. My body was working fine and until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, it was a bit like, right, well, I've got to do something about it. It's a properly big wake up call. And the great news is that when you do wake up and you do start taking action, it opens so many other doors of all this, well, in this whole personal growth world, I think, for us midlifers. And I think it's such a good opportunity to really rediscover the person that you are, and as well as obviously really look after your health and wellness as we get older as well.
You got it. Naturopathic doctors, we tend to have an Eastern medicine background. I mentioned acupuncture. And so we do Chinese medicine. Like that's part of our base education is a lot of Chinese medicine. And Eastern medicines are really interesting because they acknowledge the effect that your mind, emotion, and spirit has on your physical body. So that perspective of how are you going to look at this problem? How are you going to approach it? How are you going to deal with what's going on? If you can sort of come at it from also that energetic perspective of getting right in your mind as well, right? Like decreasing your stress levels, things like that. Also, just menopause tends to be a period of vulnerability. So just like puberty was, it's kind of, they call it, it's been referred to as the second puberty. So it's a period where a woman is vulnerable because hormones are changing. And then this means that things will bubble up to the surface if you haven't been dealing with them. You know, that go, 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 I am superwoman, all of that stuff. If you have been living your life that way for your entire adult life, for even since as long as you can remember, even further back, then this is the time where things tend to catch up to you and tend to bubble out, and they come to the surface, which is actually a huge opportunity for you to say, yeah, I'm not going to do these things this way anymore. And then you watch the physical body get better because you've made that mental, emotional, spiritual change upstairs.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. So many of my own clients come to me with exactly that. Really, really full of stress. They've been doing so much. They've lost their way. And because of menopause, it's almost like the big unveiling. It's like, right, well, we've got to deal with this now, actually. And really, it's almost like you've got to sort of break yourself down again before you can build yourself up again. And it's absolutely possible, but it does sometimes, it's a process. I'm not saying it's always easy. It is definitely a process, but actually it is so worth doing, because otherwise you are just going to stay in the same place, struggling on, and which is too easy to do. Hopefully not so much anymore because of the societal narrative of all around aging. Women just think, oh, this is it, I might as well pack up now and just sort of stay quiet, melt into the background, and give up. And thankfully, and this is why we all do what we do, I think, is to say, no, that is not the case at all. We've still got a third of our life potentially ahead of this stage. So we've really got to address what is coming up for us and actually use it in our favor and use it as an opportunity to do the things we want to do, be the person we want to be. Because you hear great stories of people in their late 40s, 50s who are just, maybe starting a new business or just totally switching up their lives. It is all possible.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yeah. And even what you said about things coming to the surface and dealing with them, if you don't, the Eastern sort of medical mindset is that that's how you'll end up with chronic disease.
Yeah.
Is when you shove things down and suppress them and don't allow them an outlet. And that can be mental, emotional things, or it can be physical symptoms that you've been ignoring. The more you shove it down, the more dysfunctional it becomes. And then, so this is really such a good opportunity for you to say, how do I want the rest of my life to look, right? That next final third.
Yeah, I'm currently doing this incredible training in breath work, and that is just such an incredible tool with this in terms of really getting into it's like a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach, really getting into your body and starting to shift some of those emotions, those feelings which you've pushed down for so many years, and actually it's time to actually bring them up. It can be uncomfortable because you do need to sort of go through them, but once you've gone through them, you can then release them and you feel a whole load lighter. And
I agree completely.
My last question I ask all of my listeners is, because this is called the Positive Perimenopause podcast, can you give the listeners one practical, actionable tip which they can take away today and put into practice, which is going to help them have a more positive perimenopause?
Oh, gosh, there are so many, but what about journaling? What about journaling? I love journaling. There are studies that show when you write something down, like let's say, you're overwhelmed, right? You've had a bad day. Writing it down is a completely different form of neurological release. You've got different brain centers lighting up when you write something down versus if you A, do nothing and just keep it inside, or B, if you vent, because that can actually be negative in terms of what brain centers light up. This is like rumination, and it will tend to re-aggravate things. Whereas if you write it, it's a very efficient form of release. And then you also get to look at what you wrote and go, like maybe my perspective, is a little bit off. Like, what if somebody said those words to me? What would I say back to them? And then that creates an area where maybe you can now give yourself some kindness and some understanding about what's going on up here.
Yes, I love that. I love reading back what I've written. Sometimes it's like, my God, did I really write that? I can't believe I did that. But it also, it really can help. Yeah, help get it out, get out whatever you're feeling. So I love that. Thank you so much. Tanya, if people do want to come and find out more about you, where can they go?
Well, I have a website, which I'm sure we can link to.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
That's my name. If you go to my website, you can download. I have a free holistic naturopathic starters guide to menopause, totally free 16-page PDF that you get to keep. And I would just use the resources that I've got there because there's good, valuable information in that guide.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on today. I've really enjoyed
so much,
chatting and learning about what you do and about naturopathic medicine. And I think it really is something for, people can explore if that's a route that interests them. It's really fascinating. So thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you.
Here are your highlights. Bioidentical or body-identical hormone replacement therapy uses hormones that are molecularly identical to those produced by the human body, while synthetic hormone replacement therapy uses hormones that are created in a lab and may have a slightly different chemical structure. Number 2, inflammation is a common antagonist to various health conditions, making them worse. You can reduce inflammation through dietary changes, movement, and also through supplements. Number 3, many symptoms of nutrient deficiencies overlap with menopausal symptoms, which is why boosting nutrients levels is something to think about during perimenopause. A good rule of thumb is to eat at least 30 different plants a week. Number 4, be aware that seemingly healthy foods can trigger inflammation in some of us. By temporarily cutting out a suspect food, you'll be able to identify if it's causing you problems and then gradually begin to reintroduce it again. Number 5, eating protein is vital for blood sugar regulation, for hormonal health, and also weight management, especially during perimenopause. Number 6, a lot of us are deficient in magnesium due to depleted soil quality and also limited fortification in foods. So really do consider either supplementing with magnesium or simply adding Epsom salts to a bath. Number 7, journaling can be a powerful tool for emotional release and gaining perspective, helping you to manage stress and improve your mental well-being during menopause. Dr. Tanya has a link in the show notes, which is for her free holistic perimenopause guide. And there is also a link in the show notes to join Dr. Tanya's waitlist for her online perimenopause program. So do check those out. I really do hope you have enjoyed this episode and found something useful in here. And if you have, why not share it with a friend who you think may also benefit from listening? I would also ask one big favor from you to help this podcast to grow and to get to more people. If you could subscribe, if you could like, and even better, perhaps leave me a review, that would be absolutely amazing and just so gratefully appreciated, because that is how these podcasts grow and get out there. So I'd really appreciate that so much. Thank you so much if you have done that already. If you are interested in working with me, if you're interested in a breathwork session, I'm coming to the end of my training, but I am still offering free half-an-hour breathwork sessions for anybody who would like to try it out. All I ask in return is that you fill in a feedback form, which is for my trainers. But yeah, I've got a few slots available at the moment. So if you would like that, if you're curious and intrigued, and it can help with so many issues, and particularly at this stage of life. So it can really help with anxiety, it can really help with reducing stress, it can also help with releasing stuck trauma from your body. So if you're interested, just send me an email, info@pollywarren.com. And if you are interested, you can come and join the Facebook group. I'll put the link as well in the show notes, or come over to Instagram and you can find me there at Polly Warren Coaching. Have a wonderful week. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.